Step into the danger zone. You don't stop listening. It's Let's Find Out with Diego. Step into it. Ooh, yeah. Are you curious about the unknown, the unexplainable? Do you find yourself intrigued by the mysterious and paranormal side of our world? Join us on an adventure into the world of inexplicable discoveries and investigations that may someday give us the final answer as to what may be behind the veil of reality. The borders of space and time have opened once again, and transmitting from the mountains of West Virginia, it's time once again for Let's Find Out with Diego. The universe is waiting for you.
The borders of space and time have opened once again and transmitting from the mountains of West Virginia. It's another episode of Let's Find Out with Diego. Thank you for taking this journey with me on this episode of Let's Find Out. At the age of 20, our guests began their journey into the world of investigations after experiencing a chilling paranormal encounter during his childhood. In 1991, he established the Western Association of Scientific and Paranormal Studies in Wyoming. Being at the forefront of groundbreaking research with meticulous attention to detail, they unraveled the mysteries of energy flow and atmospheric transformations that surged during paranormal encounters, drawing a parallel to Nikola Tesla's energy studies. Their conclusion underscores the indispensable role of quantum physics in distinguishing between otherworldly phenomena and natural events. All this plus more. Please welcome to Let's Find Out a new friend to our show, Frankie O'Sullivan. Frankie, my friend, welcome to Let's Find Out.
Hey, how you doing? Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. And thank you for your listeners for tuning in.
Oh, absolutely, man. Once Adam sent me your information and then you emailed me, I would say a short blurb, but there's so much in there. And I was talking to the wife earlier, and I was like, how do I approach this interview? Because there's so much, and I have all night. We could talk all night, my friend. So it kind of reminds me, you remember the old commercials from Dos Equis, the world's most interesting man?
Yeah.
So it kind of falls into that, because how do you tell the story of the world's most interesting man? Because not only have you had your experience with the paranormal and beyond, but you've also had 2 shows on Paraflix, and you live in a monastery. I've never met anybody who's lived in a monastery. So I don't know how to begin. So you know what? No, let's do this. Let's go back to your early childhood when you first had your experiences, because every journey starts with that moment where lightning strikes. So if you don't mind, can you take us back to that time? What do you remember?
Oh, gosh. It's very weird. I remember it as though it just happened, and that was quite a few years ago. I was about 7 years old, 6 or 7 years old. We lived in a house on Holly Avenue in a little town called Worland, Wyoming. I don't know if you're familiar with Wyoming, but it sits up there right off of the Wind River Indian Reservation. This is my parents. First time they'd ever bought a home. And so they bought this house and, of course, renovated it and stuff like that. The room that I had, there was a little hatch door in the closet that you could lift up, and it would go into what they call a crawl space. It's not really a full basement. It's just a place to access underneath the house for whatever reason. And I'd always get really weird vibes about that closet all the time as a little kid. And, I grew up in a very strict Catholic family. So my parents obviously never allowed me to watch any scary movies. I didn't know what ghosts were. I didn't know any of that type of stuff. All I knew was something was in my closet and I was scared. Now, of course, if I was a parent, I would probably look at that, without understanding the paranormal and say, oh, well, this is a kid's active imagination. They're always afraid of, things they can't see. So like it's a closet, it's dark, it's nighttime. So yeah, okay. The boogeyman's under the bed sort of situation. Um, Unfortunately for my parents, they had a better understanding of what was going on than I did as a child. Uh, Long story short, a lot of different weird activities would happen in the house itself. But for a whole entire, I'd say 7 days, 6 to 7 days, I'd wake up in the morning and around my bed would be standing 4 or 5, I call them sentinel beings. They were tall, they almost looked like monks with the, over the hood, and everything. And again, here's a child who had never seen anything like this, so I don't know who these people are. I asked my mother about it. Who are those people that are in my room every morning? Are they your friends? I don't like them in my room. That's how I handled it as a kid. And my mom's like, what are you talking about? There's nobody in your room. And so I let it go. I let it go. I was waking up in the morning and I would see these people again. But then I'd pull the covers over my head and, scared and take them off and they were gone. And then the day would go on as normal. The very last day after, was close to the 5th day when I told my mom about who are the people in my room, uh, since she had no answers for me, I was always like that little tough kid. I wasn't too afraid of very many things. And so I convinced myself that, okay, tomorrow morning when I wake up, if they're still standing there, I'm going to tell them to get out of my room. And, why are they there? I'm not going to be afraid of them. And so that's exactly what I did. I woke up, sure enough, they were all standing right there. And I was like, who are you? And why are you in my room? I'm going to tell my parents, that you're in my room and everything. And the next thing I know, my mom's waking me up.
That's interesting. Now, during the time where these beings were surrounding your bed, what was the feeling like? Was there a change in temperature? Was there anything that did they communicate with you in any way?
No. Um, After doing, studies as a, when I got older in life and dove into these things a lot deeper based off of those experiences at a young age, I found out, one, that there was a lot of people who had these interactions as children with, it sometimes be 3 beings or sometimes 4, sometimes 5, but the same thing of these unfaced figures standing around their bed, you know. Uh, I attributed it to you. You're familiar with what we call the Akashic records.
No, I'm not.
Okay, the Akashic records uh, is basically like when some of us believe that what we're living is a simulation. My reality is not your reality, so on and so forth. And so, in that simulation, before your soul, okay, like when you're a little baby, obviously you don't remember any of that. And this is the time when the neurons and then everything else are connecting to each other, and basically your single celled organism has become multiple cells and become a human being. And in that transition, before the pineal gland is fully developed and the brain is fully functioning on all those levels, you are without a soul. That's the way I see it. And I think it's these beings, and I know it sounds weird, but I think it's these beings who are kind of like the overseers, the watchers. They come down, they make sure that this whole thing is working together. That the soul's working with the body, and the energy and everything is combined. So they're like nurses, maybe one doctor and then some nurses standing around, just making sure that every connection is working to the way that it should be. Um, that's how I kind of theorize it. But then too, because I'm one of those type of people that I have to analyze everything. That's why I'm in quantum physics and so on and so forth. The analyzation and the formalization of everything has to have a meaning and a reason. And so I look at people who, are born with disabilities and so on and so forth. And this is where the whole Akashic records comes into hand, is because the Akashic records say basically your energy or your soul was picking how it wanted its body to develop or what it was going to go through, as time goes on. And I think that that's kind of more realistic with the Akashic records, because when you come into this world and you're going to live this experience or this reality, you are basically living these multiple times, because as we know, there's multiple different realities, there's multiple portals, the universe is a vast area of mirrors and shadows. And what we see in this dimension is not what is on the other side of the veil, per se, where time and space doesn't exist. So I'll end with the Akashic records. Let me know if get you confused on all this, because sometimes I can confuse myself real quick.
No, you're fine there, brother. Go ahead.
All right. So with the Akashic records, I think that what we're doing is we're setting ourselves up and we're saying, okay, well, in this next life, these are the things that I didn't do right, or maybe I was discourteous to people with disabilities. So to fully understand and atone for that kind of, we'll call it a sin, just to base something off the Bible. Okay, we're going to atone for that. So this time I'm going to live as a person with these defects, and I'm going to learn from them. And I'm going to now be on the other side of the fence, and I'm going to be ridiculed by those people who were just like me, you know? And so I think until we go through each and every individual reality in this school of life, which is why this idea of time is infinite, that we're going to get the opportunity to right our wrongs, so to speak, as time goes on. Now, some energies are newer in this. Some energies have been around for multiple lifetimes, and those energies I would call like, how about this is a great example. Did you ever see a little kid who reminded you of an old soul? Like, their knowledge and the way they spoke and everything just was well beyond their age.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, these are what we would call old souls. These are energies that have been around multiple lifetimes. Uh, some of them are lucky enough to carry back in some of their creativity, like I did, you know. And by that I mean, you look at these prodigies, little kids who can play pianos and paint and things that they were never taught. So it's almost like if you go and you look at exorcisms, there's these different levels of exorcisms, but each one of them is a development that is something that you can't explain in that person at that time. So I'm not saying these kids are possessed. Don't.
Well, it depends if you've been to a department store lately. Some kids might.
Yeah. Maybe. Well, possession or spoiled. There's two different levels.
Yes, of course.
I really do think that that's what's going on with that. So I follow the Akashic records. Long story short, I follow the Akashic records. I think that we're here to atone. Now, some people say, well, if you know all that, then why would you go do that? Well, that's the thing. You don't remember being born. You don't remember dying, as far as we know. But there's a very interesting fact to that. The pineal gland, which is something I speak on all the time because that is the last thing to form in the brain, but it's also the first thing that fully function, I should say, in the brain. The pineal gland releases DMT. You know what DMT is, right?
I'm sorry. Yes, go ahead. I do.
DMT. Okay. So DMT, and the only time that it releases these big doses of DMT, believe it or not, are at your birth and at your death. So I almost think it's like a lubricant for transitioning from this element to the next.
Well, let me ask you this, because these beings that surround your bed, let's call them your watchers, guardian angels for generic terms or such like that.
Sure.
Do you think maybe in the past or even now, it's been a misconception that they're actually extraterrestrials, mistaken for extraterrestrials that were trying to abduct you? This is where the whole sleep paralysis thing comes from, or is this a completely different thing, do you think?
Well, we talk about aliens and abduction and all of that type of stuff. But if you go back and you look at Cro-Magnon man, you go through the evolutionary scale. All right. There's 10,000 years it's unaccounted for. And this is about the time that, the, we'll call it, just for lack of a better word or terminology, aliens. Okay. I think it's a very unique term in the fact that we do carry alien DNA that's not from this planet. But I would say that in that you got this DNA that was now put together with Neanderthal, all right, and formed a sense of intelligence. Not that Neanderthal weren't intelligent, but they lacked the skills that these beings needed to harness certain things that this planet had. And so by interjecting their DNA into this DNA, we now are more of the universe than what we were. At that time, and this is going to sound really cruel, but the early man wasn't anything different than a chimpanzee or an ape or whatever. And as we know, they're our closest relatives. And there's a reason why. Okay. When that DNA was introduced in there, our minds expanded, our ability to create expanded, our ability to consume and destroy expanded. Now we have the fruits of that forbidden tree, so to speak, in the Garden of Eden, that allowed us to do a lot of things. And I think that when this first happened, the race, that had done this, the Anunnaki, I think that they wanted to atone for what they did, so they look after us. I think they share the planet with us. I think that they constantly are, making sure that we don't annihilate one another, because out of the whole entire ecosystem, and all the animals that live here and insects and so on and so forth, we're the most destructive of all of them. And to keep an ecosystem within a healthy range, you have to have some sort of handler. So we'll call him God. Because when the Anunnaki came here, this is during the very early rule of the Egyptian times. And there was a story written about it, remarkably very similar to the story of Jesus, but using Osiris and Ra and Isis and all of them is Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. But again, to 10 to 15,000 years prior. So that's quite a distance in a stretch. But they helped us build things, in early communication, helped us develop a society to live amongst each other, which we have with the pyramids, because as we all know, life started in Africa. That is where the oldest first human was found. And her DNA matched a lot of the, what do you want to call it, the Homo sapien, or not Homo sapien, but the Neanderthal DNA. She had more of that than she had, of this human DNA. So I think as evolution goes on, because evolution exists on all frames, everything always, the universe continues to expand, everything continues to grow, as do we, hopefully. But, in that evolutionary aspect of this, we have now knocked out a majority of that chromosome that's there for Neanderthal. Now, everybody who does a DNA test will realize that they do still have about, 1.1% Neanderthal DNA still in their system, which, so evolutionary wise, we have basically bred that out.
And it kind of makes sense, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but this is one of my, I say, working theories or opinions, where, And I learned a lot about when I read the book, The Lost Book of Enki. Kind of really give a little bit of a background towards the Sumerian tales and whatnot in that time. But one of the reasons why today scientists have a real hard time finding that now it's trying to escape me, that missing link, because in
Mhm.
my opinion there is no missing link, because I think it was an outside interference with the closest thing to human at that time, trying to use their science to create a I'll say a superhuman of sorts, to where evolution itself did not do it, but it was by the hand of something else.
Yeah, which we call God.
Right.
And why would we call that being or entity God? We would call that because it is something that is more powerful than us, and something that at our time would have, or at that time would have left somebody in awe. Here's this fiery thing coming from the sky, and this being walks out with other beings. These, and it's there in the hieroglyphs. It's there in Aztec culture, written on the walls. I mean, all these different cultures speak of these beings, and they transpose their facial figures and so on and so forth into different categories because language barriers are much different, back then. So everything had to still be explained. So there you go. There's your God effect. But we come from that. So that's one part of the Bible that I would say is definitely true, where it talks about we are created in His image. Well, yeah, absolutely. And, you know, we again say he. I don't think that personally it's a he or a she. I think it's an energy being that doesn't have like we do. We have to reproduce, so on and so forth, to keep our evolutionary chain going on, just for lack of better words. We have to reproduce. I don't think that they have to. And I don't think that, if you hear all these stories, people who've been abducted and or seen aliens, or worked around Area 51 or anything like that, who had seen any of these autopsies, they'll tell you that these beings didn't have mouths, they didn't speak, they communicated, you know telepathy wise. uh, and I think that we also have those abilities too, because just like it says in the Bible, since we are created in His image, we are technically gods because we
In a
share that DNA.
Yeah, because we're some sort of derivative from, like, I guess, demigod would be another term for that. Well, it's interesting you bring that up, because I was talking to a friend of mine, and full thing, I do come from a Catholic background, but then I follow more of a Pentecostal Protestant way, and boy, did I learn a lot from them, from other side of the world. What I would learn from spirituality and whatnot.
Hmm.
And where am I going with this? Yes. So, in my opinion, there hasn't been anything close to divine intervention. I would say, if anybody believes it, going back to the Book of Mormon with Joseph Smith and Angel Moroni, there was a contact there, and the whole thing springboarded from there. I can only trace any type of God intervention to that time. It seems like nothing's been going on since then. I don't know if you believe that or not, but it seems like we haven't had any big activity since then from a God. Do you know why that is?
I Well, I would tend to disagree with that. I think that we have activity with these beings to whom we had called God back in that time, but now with technology and our advancement within our own DNA, and life cycle, we view things differently than they would have in 160 AD. You know, things are going to be different. Things became much different after the Dark Ages. So I would say that we see them all the time. I think that we interact with them all the time. I think that some of these sentinel beings are the reasons why we still have the ounces of good that we have in this world. If you were a sentinel being, you're not going to tell everybody, hey, I'm an alien, because what's the human race going to do? Sure, you are. Get them, lock them up. They're nuts. So they have to interact with us in different ways. So I think that, you know, when you find yourself in situations where you look at it and you go, geez, I should be dead right now. that could be a sentinel being stepping in the way, whether you've seen them or not. I think that their powers are still of that godly aspect. But again, like I said before, I think that we are all gods with the same abilities to do that. We just don't know how to use the pineal gland in the right way. I don't think that we focus on harnessing the powers that we actually do have. And those that have, harnessed some of that power have been ostracized by society or taken in, and I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist, but taken in by the government and not allowed out, again, because they don't want those things to be out there. If everything got out there, they would never have control. I don't want to. I'm not getting political or anything, but I've also researched a lot of government files. I've talked to a lot of people who have worked in different aspects of the government, and I've learned a lot. And a lot of things I could see why they would probably never come out and tell the human population as a whole, because the sense of control would be out the door. And not only that, but I think it would erupt in utter chaos. And people say, oh, no, I think that we could just, I think that it'd be great if we all knew that. Well, I mean, COVID hit and thousands of people bought toilet paper. You see what I'm saying?
Perfect example. Yeah.
Unfortunately, evolutionary wise, some people just haven't got to that level. Some people don't spend the time honing their mind, researching books, learning things about history, and formulating their own opinion. They would rather have other people tell them what their opinion is.
No, you're absolutely right. And I'm sorry to interrupt you because this brings back something to that great radio play. I think might have been the 40s or the 50s, War of the Worlds.
Yes.
When, if you didn't tune in to the very beginning of that broadcast, oh, that's okay. I have 5 dogs, brother, so it's all good.
He's needy.
He's beautiful though. Beautiful.
Get out, buddy.
If for those that tune into that radio play, just starting or towards the middle, they swear up and down there was an actual alien invasion happening.
Yeah.
And there was mass chaos going on. Now, this did not only happen once here in the United States. That radio play was broadcast in different languages in different parts of the world with very similar results. People going out there with guns shooting things up, many riots, people panicking. So I can see how we wouldn't be, not all of us, some of us more ready than others, where the chaos, and I think that was a good little test to see how we react.
Mm-hmm.
I would put COVID to the other one too, where it was mishandled, in my opinion. And please don't knock on my door, whoever it is. Don't curse me out on Facebook. But I think that with Hollywood and with other things now, which I think we're being slowly fed this kind of information, we might be more willing to accept it. But I don't think we're there yet, at least not a majority of us.
Well, and you bring up a very good point. If you pump a bunch of medicine in right away versus put it in through an IV and let it slowly drip in to where the body accepts it, your body might go into shock. So I kind of look at us understanding that or getting that information. It should be dripped to us, not so much me, or some of the people that I know, maybe even you, but a mass majority of society, I think, would crumble. And outside of that, I think that the religious pretense would crumble. I think a lot of things would come down, and unless it's given to a person slowly and allowing them to make up their own mind, I don't think that it should. I don't think it should all come out right away. I mean, this is the moral of the story. I think that people like us should continue to do our research and hand this to people who are already, because I would assume like a majority of your listeners, are people who want to hear from people who study this, want to hear, to gain their own opinion to how they feel about these things. And I think that it takes people like us to be able to do that, us who can handle getting these type of truths and or finding those type of truths, and then slowly giving it to everybody else, those who want to receive it. And again, everything really does go right back to the Bible again, because even in the Bible, you know, God's word is only there, or God's word is there for people who want to receive it. He who trusteth in him trusteth in the Lord. Okay. So there it is. You know, I think that it's all right there. You just have to change the idea, the concept of what all of that means. You see, like with the
Yeah.
Bible, you know, you have to, Jesus spoke in parables. We already know that. Okay. And he also spoke in Aramaic, which is a dead language. We know that. So if you was to transpose what he was talking about at that time into English, it would almost be impossible to get the similarities for every single word or verbiage that's in there. So you have to ad lib certain things, but you want to try to keep it as real as you possibly can. But you can't be too real, because you also have to have control. You see what I'm saying? There's a lot mixed into that. So I think that if you take certain things out of that and you read it and then go do history, do research. This is, I tell people this all the time. I mean, there's books out there on the Anunnaki. The Egyptians had written about it. There's the Dead Sea Scrolls. There's so many things out there that are not in the Bible itself. But amazingly, if you put them all together, now the Bible makes sense. The storylines follow along, you know? It was Constantine who took out a lot of things and then tried to hide them away to, again, create Roman rule. So we have to get a pass, for one, those who wanted to control us, two, those who are sensitive to new information, and three, seekers of knowledge. These all have to follow a certain path. They all have a certain recipe, and they all have to be done in a certain time. Will it be done in my time? Who knows, you know? My job is to carry on what those before me, those who I admire, had done before me, to keep the story going. So one day we'll have that real reality.
Yes, and you know, something you said really struck me, because talking about the Bible, we're kind of given a bit of a playbook, a generic playbook about things. That's all right. And the reason Jesus spoke in parables, just like he says, the mysteries of heaven, you're not going to understand what I tell you unless I break it down to you at a third grade level in a way. Because had he gone to the full, I'll say, disclosure of what it's all about, it's like me going to a college level class talking about quantum physics, and I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. So I think it was great that it was put into, I'll say, third grade terms for us to be able to understand the whole concept of it. And talking about those extra, we'll say extra books, one of the ones that I really liked is the Book of Enoch, because it really gave a lot of backstory to the whole thing with the Nephilim, the fallen angels, and interbreeding with humans, which could be something we talked about earlier with the gods messing with the human DNA. And then before we continue to your journey, let me ask you one more question. I was talking about earlier where the gods are using generic terms. The gods haven't done a great evidence of their appearance, in a sense. Like, I know we talked about extraterrestrials and technology evolving, which has some sort of, those are the gods we're talking about in the past, but we reach a point to where, don't laugh, it's you know, I get a lot of different opinions, where have we become too dangerous for them to talk to us one-on-one? And I bring the whole concept of, we're talking about the Tower of Babel, where people are trying to build a tower to reach the heavens, and the ones above says, well, we can't let them come up here, because in the sense, you know, they're either going to kill us or take over. So in a sense, how humans are kind of like the Borg of Star Trek. We find technology, reverse engineer it, and use it for destructive ways.
Mm-hmm.
Is that where we're at right now? Is that why there's not that more of a, I'll say, contact with us like there used to be?
I think there's contact just as much, if not more, but it's with select individuals. I think that, you know, they have a keen sense of who they want to talk to with, and who they know to stay away from, you know, and monitor. I think that they monitor our government a lot, especially the War Department, because unfortunately we have the capability of blowing this planet and many other ones right off the map, you know. And I would think that if I was an alien civilization, again, to lack of using a better word or terminology, I would want to monitor them as much as possible just to make sure that they're not going to destroy everything, you know? Um, yeah, that's that's where I'm at with that.
No, I agree with you. The Earth's so beautiful. It's almost a perfect creation up until us as humans start messing with a lot of things. And of course, now we move on to I'm gonna call it a gap year where from your childhood. So which came first? Were your travels to the monastery to try to find answers about these things? Or did you establish your organization in 1991? Which came first?
My organization came first. But I did take time away from, because the first time I was doing actual paranormal investigation, I was 15 years old. Uh, I, my grandpa worked for the cemetery. And so I had been around a lot of death as a child. And so I think that having, having lived in a home that was infested with, different entities, because I don't think the people around my bed were the same ones that I was afraid of in that house. Uh, I think we just sat on a portal, but I think that with that and then being around death, I mean, I lost my best friend in childhood when we were in third grade. Just shortly after that, I lost my grandpa, who I was extremely close to, who was the one that worked at the cemetery. And then I had, right shortly after that, an uncle who was murdered in my hometown by a coworker. I mean, just constant death, 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 death. And so that made me question life. I mean, what was the point of life? Are we here to just do this and then die? I mean, it didn't make sense to me. And for my mind, everything has to make some sort of sense. It has to have some sort of formula, or I don't I don't agree with its existence in my reality. Unfortunately, death is something that you can't get away from, but I don't see it as death. I see it as rebirth. I see it, in a lot of different ways than what I did when I was a youth starting all of this and trying to investigate from the paranormal aspect. I think that once I lived in monastery and I studied the rite and I was going to become a monk and that was going to be my life. I think that when I started to read other books and I started to see how the Catholic Church was as a whole, the same misgivings I found in the Bible, I found within man. And that told me that what I was reading, again, was not only written by man, but had flaws. And it was my job at that point to understand what those flaws were. So I had to take it to one, leaving the monastery, which was a hard decision. I'm not going to lie. It was actually a hard decision because I did like the people. I did like what I did. I thought it was great. I just don't want to be a part of anything that is not going to be real, you know? And I don't want to preach something that is handed down to me by an archbishop or whoever at the Vatican who says this is the way it is and there's no other way. I don't believe that's the case. I believe that we're all individuals living our own reality, and we have to understand what our reality is, and we have to accept what our reality is. And unfortunately, I couldn't accept that. So going after that to Salem, Massachusetts, and really getting into my lineage, which was Celtic Wiccan. My ancestors were witches, Celtic witches, the old Druid system. And everything was medicinal. Everything was from the earth. You lived by it. You gave back to it. You're only here to borrow things in your time. And so you have to put back. I felt more connected to that idea, and than I did anything else. So I kind of, I still utilize things from the Bible because I believe there are some things in there that are truth. Um, but I also see a lot of things or know a lot of things in there that were written for control from Constantine's era on forward. Um, and so those are, where I would disagree. But to get back to the story, every bit of this is a journey. Your life is a journey. My life is a journey. I mean, my dog's life is a journey. She's sharing it with me, but still a journey for him. And I think that we're all on that journey to seek out the answers that we need to find in this life. I also think to atone for whatever we've done in past lives, because again, like Tesla proved, Einstein's talked about, energy doesn't die, it just moves on. And we've done a lot of clinical tests to prove that there's a certain part of something that leaves the human body right after death. And it wasn't air, it wasn't bodily fluids, something else that has been documented leaves. And I would choose to call that the consciousness or the spirit, which is what resides in the pineal gland. And, we're such a great organic computer system that, we're good enough to hide all these things for ourselves. So that's why we have to atone for those other things, and we have to find our own reality. Yeah, that's where I would go with that.
No, and in mentioning Nikola Tesla, was he a perfect example of what you were talking about earlier on the episode where I'll say he was kind of touched by the gods, where he was doing these miraculous things for his time that people were just amazed, and I mean, other people ripped off, of course. But did you follow a lot of his works, and did you use some of that, some of his theories into your paranormal investigations?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I use a lot of his theories in paranormal investigations, and the reason why is because we work on a vibration. We are energy beings. We are the human psyche. I'm gonna go all the way back to like the beginning. Everything has a vibration. If you listen to any microphones that have been put into outer space, the Earth has a vibration or a sound or musical notes. So does every other planet. So does space itself. As do we. As do trees. As do everything has a vibration. And when we tune into that vibration, we become connected, like a USB port and a plug. We become connected to that which is around us. And the analogy that I like to use for a lot of people is that, when you get up in the morning, you wake up, you feel really good, or whatever. And say you're in a really good mood and you go to the grocery store, you go to the gas station to get your coffee, and there's a jerk there. And automatically you sense the negative energy. And the next thing you know, your energy becomes consumed with that negative energy because you're there, you're in that space, and you're being affected by that. We are controlled by that energy. So learning to control your vibration and tuning into those things that you want to be tuned into to keep your center, centered, for lack of a better word. You have to learn how to tune in to all of these things and tune out what doesn't work.
And during these investigations, did you conduct them mostly in Wyoming? Did you started it there? Or did you go across the
Started in
United States?
Wyoming. Started in Wyoming.
All right.
Yeah.
So when you record and capture evidence, whether on video, um, audio, whatever, however you do it, I didn't mean to sound rude. It's not very rude. I'm sorry. What is it what are you capturing? What are these things? What is going on? Because they're living outside of our space and time. I mean, in my opinion, are these souls of people, or are these just the energy beings that are still here, or maybe I'll say souls from an ancient civilization that are still lingering on Earth?
I think there's multiple of what you just said. I think that there's inhuman spirits. I think there's human spirits. I think that there are just capsules of different energy or vibrations that are, we receive like an antenna. And some of it doesn't correlate with here. I mean, like this right now, our video is being sent out in multiple little waves that I can't see with my own peripheral, neither can you, but somehow it reaches to where you're at and it's making that connection. So now imagine billions of these tiny little things floating through the air, these energy waves, creating these images, these voices, so on and so forth. I think that as a paranormal investigator, that's where you have to be able to use science and dissect these things between things that are normal and things that are paranormal. And that's the science of it. I mean, there's too many paranormal investigators out there, and I hate to bash on my own kind because I think that anybody who has an interest in this is doing the right thing. But I think sometimes paranormal investigators get lost into everything's haunted, everything is demonic, and to me that's you're spending too much time watching TV and not enough time learning the science of what this is, because the paranormal, I mean, I get it. At one time the paranormal and science didn't work together, but again, like Nikola Tesla said, if science spent more time trying to understand the paranormal, they would understand a lot more about humans. They would understand a lot more about life. And I think that that's where paranormal investigators get lost. You have to use science. You have to use deduction. You have to be a realist about everything. You can't just assume, oh, did you hear that? That's a ghost. That's definitely a ghost. How do you know that? What scientific proof, what data do you have to back up that? And I think that's what my team does is we apply data, formulas, and equipment to test these theories to make sure that it is something that is paranormal. Again, if it was normal, then it's normal. If it's paranormal, then it's what we're interested in. But we have to be able to dissect those things. Too many people talk about, I know too many paranormal investigators who do this. They go to somebody's house, the person says, oh, my house is haunted. Okay, we'll go over there. And they start investigating. And they bring a psychic medium with them or whatever, And the psychic medium, first thing they say is, oh, yeah, I feel there's a lot of spirits here. And, there's definitely some demonic spirits here. Well, now the homeowner's scared shitless because they already believe this to be true. And then the paranormal investigators go in there and they go, oh, yeah, my REM pod went off. Yeah, your house is definitely haunted. You got spirits in here and they're not happy. And now the homeowner's scared literally to death. But when they have real paranormal investigators who come in there and apply the sciences, know the history, know religious history, know everything that you need to know in and out to apply a formula to these different things, that's when you're doing the right thing for the homeowner who's deathly afraid,
No, you're right, and you can definitely determine who's doing it for clicks and views, and those who are actually there doing the real deal.
Yeah. And what's the really scary part is the people who are not on YouTube, the people who don't have a TV show, but watch all these TV shows and believe that they're going to go out there and be paranormal investigators. There are things that you will come across in the paranormal world that can make you sick. And, it's energy and can do damage to you. You need to learn. I mean, you don't just get in the car and drive. You learn how to drive first.
Mm-hmm.
And then as the years go by, you become hopefully a better driver. It's the same thing in any type of field, whether you're a doctor, a lawyer, a practitioner, it doesn't matter what you do in your life. You had to start at the very beginning. Nobody starts at the top.
And that's true. It's not just only for paranormal. It's the same thing for people who watch a few Bigfoot shows or cryptids, and they're gonna go out in the woods. Well, first of all, you're not prepared for survival skills. You're gonna go out in the woods. You're gonna fall on a log. You're gonna break your neck. A cougar's gonna bite you. You're gonna get ticks. You're not prepared for that life. So it's the same thing with paranormal investigations. And it's perfect how you said it. You really need to be prepared, not only in generic terms with your equipment or study up, but spiritually you have to be prepared.
Yeah, you have to be, because if there's a even if it's a human spirit, if it's a human spirit whose energy was tragic, that darkness is going to consume you in that situation if what you're dealing with is a true haunting. And I've been in places that had real paranormal activity. And these are not on the open market places. These are just private places that people wanted somebody to come in who came from a science background to really apply these things. And the things that we caught there, the things that we seen, the things that we felt. I mean, I've known people who have done this. Luckily for me, knock on wood, it hasn't happened to that severity yet, but have ended up in the hospital. Strokes, heart attacks, you know, your biological system is affected by this energy. And if you don't know what you're doing and you don't know how to handle these things and you don't know the warning signs when they start to happen to remove yourself from that situation, you could become in a really bad situation. And I know there's a lot of paranormal investigators out there who are young in this and automatically, oh, that's a bunch of BS. That doesn't happen, you know, blah, 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 blah. Well, if you ever encounter a real haunting where things are poltergeist activity and of a dark nature, you're going to find out real quick. And hopefully it's not the last time you ever paranormal investigate. You know?
Yeah, and they'll know if you're weak or strong too.
Exactly. Yeah, because they can read your energy. They feed off of your energy. You know, I tell people, you know, because I've seen paranormal investigators who are like, oh yeah, I went out and I got high before I went to my paranormal investigation, or yeah, I went out and had some beers and everything else when we went to our paranormal investigation. I'm thinking, wow, that's just like the dumbest thing you could do.
Yeah,
You know, and
absolutely.
luckily, whatever you were dealing with wasn't really a haunting or in a bad nature. Because if you would have done that in a place where the energy is dark, that might be the last paranormal investigation you do.
Yeah, and the fact that the credibility of that person, I mean, who really cares if that's what they're going to do? But it hurts hardworking folks like yourself and other people that you know who are putting in the work and doing this the honest way. It makes a lot of us look like, oh, these guys are crazy. They're just out there, bunch of hooligans out there pretending they know something.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, I want to support anybody who wants to get into the paranormal. I want to support them, but what I guess my biggest advice would be team up with somebody who's credible, knowledgeable, and has been in this field for a long time. These are the people that you want to mentor you if you're serious about this, you know, and then go from that point. Don't just jump into it because you bought a REM pod or whatever on you know,
On eBay or
on eBay or
Amazon.
whatever, you
Yeah.
know, and then run into the first place that somebody said was haunted and think that you know what you're doing, because that's when bad things happen.
Oh no, I for sure that's definitely very definitely true. And I've never been to Wyoming. And you'd be the perfect person for me to ask this. What are the more, I want to use the word famous, but what are the more noted places that have a lot of paranormal activity? Something noted in history, like, oh, this is this mansion or the cemetery or this farm where real deals happen here.
I would say the biggest one, I mean, there's multiple that I like, but the biggest one is going to be the Wyoming Frontier Prison in Rawlins, Wyoming. Uh, that one there had a gas chamber, electric chair, and back in the day, they used to hang people there. So that place has definitely got a very unique feeling. I would also say too, if you get permission, and only if you get permission, the medicine wheel, which was a ceremony that the Plains Indians did there in Wyoming, like the Shoshone and the Shoshone Bannock tribe. Um, I would also say Witch Mountain, which if they know anything about Wyoming, they'll understand this one. It's in Casper, Wyoming, and it's up on Casper Mountain, but it's a sits kind of back a ways behind Casper Mountain in this place that they call Witches Mountain. That forest there has got a lot of interesting energy at night. That and I would say, of course, the Custer's Last Stand battleground. I would say quite a few places in Thermopolis, Wyoming, and Cody, Wyoming, like the Irma Hotel, or in Thermopolis, the natural hot springs there. It's not far from the Medicine Wheel. Well, it's a little ways from Medicine Wheel, but that area there, because that was ceremonial land. They used to do the Wedding of the Waters. I think they actually still hold that ceremony, the Wedding of the Waters, there. But anywhere along the Oregon Trail that goes through Wyoming is an amazing thing. If you could, go back and find the old maps that were charted, where they would usually circle their wagons at night. They had certain spots after they had gone through Wyoming plenty of times, taking people to Oregon, where they knew they wouldn't, come across, any hostile natives or anything like that. Because the Native Americans at that time weren't very keen on these people coming through there and trashing the land and, destroying the bison population and everything. So there's some great places, because a lot of people died on the Oregon Trail through Wyoming, from rattlesnake bites to, Indian raids, you name it. Yeah, those are the things that Wyoming has to offer, that I say are interesting things to check out.
Wow, I would love to visit Wyoming one time. Now, the subject to a lot of your investigations, was this related to the two shows you had in Paraflix? Was that included in there, or was it two completely different things?
As far as no, this like the crossover discoveries, that was shot in upstate New York, Plattsburgh, New York. Uh, and then All Things Paranormal was my talk radio show, and that was held in Hollywood, California, at Dash Studios, Dash Talk X. And yeah, the rest, I mean, I did some stuff with Patty Negri there, uh, and a couple other groups. Katie Burr from Ghost Lab. Oh, let me see. Yeah, I saw a lot in Hollywood. So of course, there's going to be things like Griffith Observatory. Let me see. Suicide Bridge, the Queen Mary, the Hollywood Sign, Griffith Park. All that.
Wow, and we're almost coming close on time, but you mentioned a lot of things there, and I think, like I said, we only scratched the surface here, and I would love to bring you back again one more time, because I think that we can probably do another 3 hours of not only your experience but these locations that you mentioned. Would you love to come back and
Oh
share some
yeah,
of these
yeah,
things?
absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome.
I love
And
sharing my experience. I know, but it's hard to follow me sometimes, because I get a million things going through my brain, and I'm like, wait, slow down. We're gonna talk about this, and I have to slow my brain down, because I just want to word vomit it all out.
no, that's okay. Sometimes you get that download, you want to go ahead and get it out there. That's why I definitely want to bring you back. And for our friends and listeners of Let's Find Out that want to learn more about what it is that you do and where you're going to be, where can they find out?
Well, I'm working with Nate Banker, who's my technical engineer and paranormal investigator with me, who's uh, got quite a few years of experience, builds a lot of our equipment. And I'm also working with Martin Kleba. He was on Pirates of the Caribbean, does a lot of Disney movies, stuff like that. We're currently working on a project called Dead Men Do Tell Tales. Um, and we've got some locations that we're setting up for that right now. You can obviously follow me on Paranormal with Frankie O'Sullivan. I do talks, that I'll post on there, like with this show, and other shows that I do. But as far as like any filming and stuff like that, that's our next project, is the Dead Men Do Tell Tales. with Martin Kleba. So it's called Martin Kleba's Dead Men Do Tell Tales. I'm just one of the lucky guys who gets to be on it.
Excellent. And, I'd like to thank our good friend Adam Began for bringing us together and making this interview
Yes,
possible
Adam.
for us to have a great conversation. And definitely, my friend, look forward to bringing you back again in 2025.
All right. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, my friend. This has been another excellent episode of Let's Find Out with Diego. Please check us out on all our social media pages, as well as on YouTube and Rumble. Like, share, and subscribe. Also, Let's Find Out is on KGRA Digital Broadcasting. Catch the show on Saturdays at 2 a.m. For more information, please visit kgradb.com. That's kgradb.com. Together, we will get one step closer to finding out. Thank you for taking this journey with me. Until next time, my friends.
Let's find out with Diego! The power of Diego madness! Ooh, yeah! All content for Let's Find Out is property of co-host Diego and is served directly from our servers with no modification, redirects, or rehosting. All celebrity impersonators are paid performers. The impersonated celebrities do not endorse or promote any views or opinions expressed by our guests, co-host Diego, or Let's Find Out. The information shared on Let's Find Out is provided on an as-is basis, with no guarantees of completeness, accuracy, usefulness, or timeliness.